There was a movie that came out in 2004 starring Adam Sandler and Drew Barrymore. You may have seen this before. It was titled 50 First Dates. Just curious, anybody heard of that one before? Okay, so y'all know what I'm talking about. They fall in love, they spend hours talking one day, he goes back to see her the next day, has no idea who he is. And she has that condition, and everybody kind of plays up to it. They make sure she sees the same newspaper every day. They reenact her dad's birthday party every day. Every night she goes to bed, she wakes up the next day, she can't remember anything. Her short-term memory is damaged. Now, that particular condition is fictitious, but it is very similar to some conditions that have been recorded that are actually true medical conditions. The BBC did a series of interviews one time with a man by the name of Clive Wearing. It's fascinating. You can go find these on YouTube. I would highly recommend it. It's just fascinating. This man, he has no short-term memory at all. His memory lasts from 7 to 30 seconds. At the age of 46, he got a virus. It got into his brain, destroyed what's called the hippocampus. He can't make new memories whatsoever. He writes this diary, and you go into his room, and they record all this, and there's this diary on the bed, and it's got he's constantly checking his watch because he's constantly making entries. I'm just now waking up. I'm finally awake. He always feels like he's coming into consciousness, and he never has been before. And they'll pick up his diary and say, look, you wrote such and such yesterday. And he says, no, that's not him. He scratches out the entries before the current entry because he thinks they're imposters. It's his handwriting, but no, that's not me. I didn't write that before. I'm just now waking up for the very first time ever. He knows his wife still. He acts like he hasn't seen her in years. Every time she comes into the room, hugs her, kisses her, but she walks out of the room, walks right back in. It's the same thing all over again, greeting her for the first time in years. He was a musician, a world-class conductor, pianist. He can still do that, but he has no idea how he's doing it. And as he is finishing a piece, he will go into convulsions because something familiar is ending and he's going back into the confusion again. It's incredible. It's incredible to watch. But his wife gives this one statement. I want to read it to you. She says, Clive's world now consists of a moment with no past to anchor it and no future to look ahead to. Everything goes in perfectly well, but as soon as he's perceived it and looked away, it's gone for him. Now, can you imagine if that was true for you? Can you imagine the tragedy if you had no memory whatsoever to hold to, nothing to anchor to from your past, nothing to project to into the future because you were a creature with no memory? How terrible would that be? I mean, remembering my wife on our wedding day, remembering the day your children were born, remembering every I love you that you ever said, every I love you that you ever heard, if they were all gone, what a tragedy that would be. We are our memories. We are a compilation of our memory. You cannot even tell me who you are without your memory. Without memory, I'm just a nondescript man speaking to nondescript human beings with nothing, because we are our memory. It's a funny thing to think of because a memory is not a real thing. It even doesn't represent something in the now. It represents something that's already gone by. It's intangible, but it's who we are. And without our memories, well, what a sad state of affairs we would have. Our memories aren't always the most pleasant and helpful thing, though. We need our memories. We must have our memories. We are our memories, but they're not always very nice. They're not always very helpful. Disappointment and hurt, they stay with us. They become a part of who we are. When they're processed well, we do what's called growing. We become wiser and we become stronger because of bad memories. But processed incorrectly, they can be very dangerous. A memory of a father who was harsh or who was never pleased becomes the memory that I'm not valuable and I'll never please anybody. The memory of one bad decision or one abusive situation regarding sexuality becomes the proof of the fact that I will never be whole. I'll always be damaged. The memory of that one bad comment that one church member made at one time in the past becomes the proof that I don't belong there. And I'll never step foot in there because It's just a bunch of hypocrites over there. Our memories can become dangerous if they are processed, if they are interpreted incorrectly. And for good or for bad, we are shaped today by our memories. And the question we've got to ask ourselves is, are our memories true? Are we remembering them rightly? Are we interpreting them rightly? I have an illustration I like to use from time to time involving Whit. He probably doesn't even remember this, but I remember one time when he was 2 years old. I was cooking something in the oven, and I was going to get that, and I had that hot dish of casserole in my hands. The oven was still open for where I had just now picked it out of the oven, and here he comes, 2 years old, and he's just kind of bumbling towards that open oven. And there's nothing I can do with my hands. I'm holding hot casserole. He's about to hurt himself very badly in the oven, and so all I know to do is I reach out my leg and I kick him down. Now, he doesn't even remember it. I'm sure he doesn't. But if he did, there would be the danger of misinterpretation. And so when we remember, we have to make sure that we are remembering rightly. Memory plays a big role in who we are. It becomes our identity. And so if we have a false memory, we have a false identity. And that's what I want to talk about today, our memories. The first thing we see in God's Word is before God ever calls us to remember, He remembers Himself. He teaches us how to remember. Exodus 3 is the first time in Scripture that we are told, you need to remember. But before we get there, we've already seen these words. God remembered Noah. God remembered Abraham. God remembered Rachel. And we know how God hears the groaning of His people, and He remembers them in Egypt. He remembers His covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. God remembers. He remembers His people. He remembers His promises to His people. And this idea of being remembered by God is not just the idea of Him bringing a thought to mental assent. To be remembered by God is to be in favor with God. To be forgotten by God, you might as well not exist. In Hosea chapter 4 and verse 6, since you have forgotten the law of your God, I also will forget your children. There's more than just losing a memory that's happening there. A terrible thing to be forgotten by God. Matthew chapter 7 and verse 23, and then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you workers of lawlessness. We serve a God who is faithful to remember His children, but for those who reject the Lord and remove His law from their hearts, He says, I do not even know who you are. Luke chapter 23, the thief on the cross makes a plea. Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And He said to him, truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. I will remember you. I will not reject you. And isn't it wonderful that our eternity rests not on the fallible, imperfect memory of man, but upon the perfect memory of our perfect God? You don't have to wonder with God, is He going to remember this right? He is the same yesterday, today, and for the rest of my days, and He is perfect every single one of those days. His memory is perfect. You don't have to wonder with God, did He remember, did He understand the memory correctly? You remember when Abraham sojourned in the promised land and in the land of Gerar there on one particular time, he comes into the land of Abimelech, and Abimelech sees his wife and she is beautiful, and so Abraham lies, she's my sister. This is the second time he's done this now. And Abimelech finds out the truth later on, and Abimelech is very worried about that. What is God going to do to me? What is God going to do to my land because of what I have done? But you remember what God said in Genesis chapter 20 and verse 6. Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Abimelech, I not only know what happened, I know where your heart was when it happened. God remembers. Doesn't just remember events and actions. He remembers the position of the heart in those events and those actions. You may be thinking back on your memory, thinking, God is going to remember that, and what is He going to do about that? God knows where your heart was then. God knows where your heart has grown since then. He remembers perfectly, and He remembers with perfect mercy and perfect grace. David says in Psalm chapter 25 and verse 7, remember not the sins of my youth or my transgressions. According to your steadfast love, remember me, for the sake of your goodness, O Lord. And God answers that prayer. He remembers perfectly, and He remembers with perfect mercy, perfect grace, perfect love. God, remember me. God remembers. But what about our memory? Well, we've already read God calls us to remember Him. And so I want to look at two different facets of that memory. And the first thing is, before we even come to our own personal memories which we create, God calls us to remember something that happened way before we were even in existence. He calls us to remember a memory that we did not create. And the first two times that God calls His people to remember, He says it in such a way that it applies even to us today. Thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Throughout all generations. That's you, that's me, that's everybody. Throughout all generations, I want you to have this memory. I want you to commit it to memory. It's not a memory you created, but it's something that I want you to store away in your memory bank. Remember this. Exodus chapter 3. Moses is given excuse after excuse after excuse why he can't go talk to God's people and to Pharaoh. They're not going to accept me. I can't speak well. What if they ask me where my authority lies? And Moses is asking all these questions. He asks, what if they ask me what your name is? In Exodus chapter 3 and verse 14, beginning, God said to Moses, I am who I am. Some translations, I am that I am. And He said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. I am that I am. I am who I am. The gods of the Egyptians had names like Ra or Osiris or Ammon. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, He has a name that transcends names. You can't really name Him. He just is. I am that I am. It's a name that's eternal. I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. I eternally am. Not was, not will be, am. Forever I am. Remember how Jesus uses this passage to prove the resurrection. God said He is the God of Abraham, and He is the God of Isaac, and is the God of Jacob. Not was, as in when they used to be. They still are, and He still is, forever. He's eternal. God is the I am. His name is perfect. It's unconditioned. It's independent. The existence of God does not depend upon other conditions outside Himself. He is ultimately unnameable because there is no one thing that can describe exactly what He is. He is greater than all. The Bible grasps at it. The Bible gives us certain aspects of God. God is light. God is love. God is spirit. But those names don't in and of themselves capture everything that God is. There's no name that will. He is unnameable. He is above all names. He is the great I am. It's the most high divine state of being that you can imagine, one that eternally is and who eternally will be. And so the first time God ever commands His people to remember, it's this. Remember who I am. Remember my name. That's what I want you to remember throughout all generations. Remember who your God is. He is most eternal. He is most high God. The second thing that He asks us to remember is what He has done. Look at Exodus chapter 12. This is the second occurrence of God commanding His people to remember. Exodus chapter 12 and verse 14. This day shall be for you a memorial day, and you shall keep it as a feast to the Lord. Throughout your generations, as a statute forever, you shall keep it as a feast. Now, what we're talking about here is Passover. And the Passover was a memorial of what God did for His people. Just a chapter over in chapter 13, you shall tell your son on that day, it is because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. And it shall be to you as a sign on your hand and as a memorial between your eyes, that the law of the Lord may be in your mouth. For with a strong hand the Lord has brought you out of Egypt. It was the centerpiece of Israelite identity. Who are we? We are the people that God delivered. We are the delivered people. And that Exodus and this Passover became the centerpiece of who they were. Now, I understand, and I hope we all understand that we're not bound to Jewish traditions and Jewish feasts and Jewish memorials, but God has taken this one and He has translated it into what we now refer to as the Lord's Supper. Christ is now the Passover lamb. And deliverance now does not just refer to one deliverance out of a physical slavery, but deliverance out of a sin slavery. And as great as that deliverance was when God brought them out of Egypt, how much greater still is our deliverance when God brings us out of sin? Remember what our God has done. God says, remember me. I want you to remember who I am, His high and His eternal nature. And he realizes when we forget who He is, we forget where we are coming from. We forget who we are. We forget the image that we're called to bear. So the first thing He wants us to remember who I am. That's important. Secondly, remember what I have done. Remember what I did in Egypt. Remember what I did at the cross. Remember my sacrifice, my love, my power, my faithfulness. God knows that when we forget this, then we forget the reverence and the awe that He is due for the great things that He has done. Remember who I am. Remember what I have done. And God knows that we are weak and we are shallow and that we are prone to forget. And so He calls us to remember certain things. Now, these two memories, who God is, what God has done, it applies to every other memory that we have. It's the one memory that touches all other memories. And everything else that we remember, we see it through the lens of what we remember about our God. I don't want you to go to sleep on me now, but I'm going to read from a medical journal. This really interesting article in 2014 in the Journal of Neuroscience. It speaks about memory, and it's fascinating the way that our brains work. Don't go away. All right, here we go. When you build a new memory, you gather little bits of information, what the room looks like, who's talking, what they're wearing, and store them together. When you bring up an old memory, the bits of information get melded with new bits relevant to your present life. So I remember what she was wearing that day. Well, now that I've gone forward in time, I remember when she wore that dress on a different occasion, and the two memories go together, and there's new associations. New bits of information get melded into the old memory. A memory isn't a static thing that you bring in and it slowly gets moved out and stuck somewhere in the brain. Every time you retrieve it, you have the ability to modify it. This makes your memory quite unlike the video camera you may imagine it to be. These findings build on others and may also explain why we can be thoroughly convinced that something happened when it didn't, and why eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable. Our memories are thus less a snapshot of the past and more a record of our current view on the past. What it's basically saying is your brains have the ability to control and edit your memories. Case in point, Brother Jenkins was with us this morning, and I said I love the way that Brother Jenkins explains the teachings of Jesus because a grave digger in Palestine can understand him. Brother Jenkins never said that. He said a ditch digger in Palestine can understand it, but I was convinced. That was my memory of what he's preached before. We can go back and we can edit. We call it senior moments sometimes, but we do that all the time. We edit our memories and we remember just a little bit differently than what actually happened. And so that's why I say it's not our memories that can cause us problems. Sometimes it's the lies that get attached to the memories that can trip us up. It's not that harsh dad, the memory of that harsh dad that destroys my identity. It's the lie that I believe that I'm not valuable, that I attached to that memory and become something that harms me. It's not the abuse. It's not the hypocritical church member. It's the lie I believe every time I recall that memory, and I recall it as proof for that wrong thing that I like to believe. It's not the memories that damage us. It's the lies that get added to the memories that end up hurting us. And what I'm calling us to do this afternoon, let's go back and let's edit those memories again and try to make sure that we're remembering them rightly because we have the power to do so. And let's line them up with what I remember to be true about my God and consequently what I remember to be true about myself. So I have that memory that I use, I pull it up. Here's the proof that I'm not valuable. But wait. God came to this earth and He died for me. Not because I was perfect, but in light of my brokenness, in the light of the fact that I needed Him, He came and He died for me. The eternal Father, the God of the universe, did that. I can't be invaluable. That memory can't be true. What I know to be true of God is true. You see how that works? I've attached this lie, but my knowledge of my God sets it straight. That memory that proves that God isn't always in control, that sometimes you have to just take the reins and take care of yourself, But remember that God is eternal, that God is most high. His thoughts are above my thoughts. His ways are above his ways. His timing is above my timing. And so let's edit that memory. It cannot prove that God is not in control, because he's the only being in the universe that is in control, and he's the only one that I would want to be in control. So what it means is I just haven't understood God's plans yet. You see how that works? We have these memories that we recall as proof for the wrong things that we believe. But if we'd go back with God's truth in hand, we can set it straight. We can set our own memories straight. So is there any memories from the past that you need to edit this afternoon? Anything that brings you down from your past, that if you had the truth of God in hand, you could be free and you could set it straight and you could live unencumbered. The problem is, when the past becomes a lie that affects the present, it's no longer the past, is it? It's a past that won't go away. It is the present, and we need to deal with it. If the past is hurting us today, we need to set that straight. It could be that there are some here this afternoon that are not living the abundant life that God has created you to live. You're hung up on a lie that Satan planted in the past somewhere, and it won't go away until you set it straight. Can I encourage you, with God's help, to set the record straight today? It could be that there are some here in this auditorium that you haven't given your life to God yet. The story you tell yourself is, I don't need to be a Christian today. I don't need to be baptized for the remission of my sins today. I don't need to put him on. I don't need to become a member of the Lord's church, at least not right now. Can I encourage you to go back and readdress that question, readdress that thought? Can I encourage you to challenge those thoughts that you carry around with you this afternoon? Take a look in God's Word and see if he can't help you set things straight. If there's anybody here this afternoon that's not a Christian, please come. If there's anybody here that's living below your privilege, you are a Christian, and yet you're not walking the Christian life. If there's something in your life you need to get out of it, you need to set something straight. If there's anybody that needs to come this afternoon, please come as we stand and we sing.